Good morning and welcome to Ask the Experts. My name is Kimberly Mann. I am a community liaison here with Hospice of Southern Maine, a nonprofit hospice agency operating in Cumberland and York counties. And we are here to run what I think is a really exciting webinar. We want to highlight and focus some things focus on some things that people may not be aware are connected with hospice. Sometimes people think it's very clinical, it's just nursing care at end of life, and we want to highlight all of the interesting and innovative things that our volunteer program offers. We've titled this webinar, Compassion in Action, Innovative Volunteering in Hospice, and I think that's exactly what you'll find out it is. Of course, Medicare requires certain things of hospice agencies, and one of the things they require is volunteer participation and service measured in hours. So it's important for every hospice agency, for-profit or not-for-profit, to include volunteers in the work that they're doing. And we like to say we have at least as many volunteers as employees here at Hospice of Southern Maine. Which puts us at over 150 volunteers. It's a really large number of people who are willing to give of their time and energy and support patients at end of life. And it's really good work. It's work that fits and is tailored to your interests and your ability to share. And today we have with us 3 of our very special volunteers. Who have been with us a little while, varying amounts of time. So I will let them introduce themselves by name, tell what their sort of specialty is with volunteering, and how long you have been volunteering. Let's start here.
Sure. I'm Suze Kelly, and I've been volunteering for about 3 years now. And I specialize in offering Reiki at Gosnell House, as well as if there's a special request, I'll do it in the home program. And then I do volunteer in the home program as well as, just doing companion type work or support in the household for families. And we'll do Reiki with my home clients if that's something that they're interested in.
I'm Amy Martell. I've been volunteering for almost 6 years, and my specialty is I'm part of a pet therapy team. I have a cat named Ferris Bueller, who I bring into Gosnell House once a week for anywhere from 1 to 2.5 hours, depending on his mood. And upon special request, I will also do home program visits, but that has only happened once. For the most part, I stay at Gosnell House and visit the families and patients there. Thank you.
My name is Lee Urban, and I'm evidence that there's a place for everyone in hospice, because I specialize in cribbage and in playing the ukulele. So somewhere in between there's a place for you. In terms of the cribbage, basically, I do that online with someone. And then for the ukulele, it's more of a music program. I was the first member of the Heartstrings program 8 years ago. I've been doing this for 8 years. And you wouldn't think that a little ukulele would give real comfort to not only the patient, but to the caregivers and also the staff. There's, you think of this is the teeny one. I don't play that. That's a little jangly. For the Heartstrings program, I usually will do this. Used to do this at Gosnell with a cellist. So this is the plug. If there are any cellists out there, I'd love to chat with you. We did that until the pandemic. And we can talk later about my experiences there.
Great. And then we have one volunteer who is with us, but not present with us. And you can probably see her on your screen, so I'll let her introduce herself. Kathy?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Wallace, and I lose track of how long I've been volunteering. I think it's about 7 or 8 years. I started at Gosnell, and then moved to the home program, and then became a Reiki master and helped start the Reiki program at HSM. And then I've been part of a group of people who studied to be end-of-life doulas, who are currently doing legacy work with hospice. And that means that, often as people are dying, they're looking back on their lives. And the legacy program provides volunteers to help them do that. In some cases, I've helped to work on a life scrapbook that a patient has wanted to do for their family. In other cases, I've written up a biography of someone after interviewing them, usually pretty extensively. Or what happens quite often is people want to communicate. And so I interview them and then draft letters or notes for them to send to people that they want to apologize to, or people that they want to share love with, people they want to thank. So it's this very beautiful work of sitting with people in the midst of death, looking at their lives and finding meaning. And I just love this work.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll swing back for more questions, so be listening. And I also want to say to any of our audience that has joined us today, if something comes to mind that you'd like us to try and answer, we'll do our best. Go ahead and type it in the chat, and we'll try to get to it. If not during the webinar, we'll try to respond to it after. As well as I will say, any resources that are mentioned today, once the webinar recording is produced and set in our library, we will also list any resources that we've mentioned, websites that you can go to, information on how to contact us, and begin your volunteer journey if you're interested. All right, so that said, one of the things that our registrants put in the questions were they're curious about what is involved in being a volunteer. So I'm thinking, let's talk about the time commitment, the training, how you can mention sort of just what you're interested in doing, and maybe mention that kind of your choice. You don't have to do everything. Let's just start with that. Maybe I'll just present that openly to you guys. If you want to mention a little bit about what's involved in the training. And first of all, how do you sign up? Maybe go to the Hospice and Southern Maine website. Is that how you first did it?
Yeah, there's a volunteer or how to help, or there's a volunteer section. Yeah. And then you get the contact information for the volunteer, Kathy, I don't know what coordinator, and then you can inquire directly, but if there's a upcoming training, it'll be listed there as well.
And what is the training involved?
The training is 30 hours and it tends to be over 4 separate days, 2 weeks in a row. And it's, like at least probably 6 hours some of the days. So it's all like a full day training each day. And you just do different exercises. They have guest speakers come in. You learn lots about the grieving process and your own experience and feelings around death and the grieving process. And then after you've completed the 30 hours of training, you do 2 shadows at Gosnell with a volunteer that's been established there. And then you can start volunteering typically.
And for anyone listening, we've referenced Gosnell a couple of times. And just in case you're not sure, Gosnell is our inpatient facility for hospice care that we own and operate here in Scarborough. And it's a great place. We have volunteers there as well as out in the home program. So just to clarify that. And then what is the expected commitment? of a
Um,
volunteer?
Well, once you become a volunteer, they ask for a 1-year commitment, so at least to volunteer for a year. And up to 4 hours a week. Some people do fewer than that, like me. I whim to my cat. But I will do, like I said, 1 to 3 hours a week. Some volunteers will do 2 shifts at Gosnell, which equals 6 hours a week. Home programs could take as much as you want, but the commitment is pretty much an average of 4 hours a week.
Yes.
I also think that no one will be kicked out if they don't do a week, or if they're not doing 4 hours a week. I'll lay it on the table. I do 1 hour a week plus whatever comes up with the heartstrings program. And that seems to work. I haven't been fired yet.
And another thing I just popped into my head is we do have to do 8 hours of continuing education a year. If you're going to continue from year to year as a volunteer, you're required in it to do 8 hours of continuing education. That can be visits to a funeral home. It could be books. It could be movies. It can be podcasts, just anything where you're learning more about the grief and dying process to help.
And it's pretty easy to get those aids.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, there's a lot of
Kathy will
opportunities.
give you 15 movies you can
Yeah.
watch if you're
Yeah.
a movie person,
Right,
or
yeah.
books to read. So
Yeah,
That's not hard.
no, it's actually, it's great. You learn a lot of great stuff doing that from different perspectives.
And the HSM will actually put together some trainings and, interesting tools to learn about that they will send out to you periodically, and you can sign up that way too.
Now we're gonna go through, I wanted to also mention that we were talking with the volunteer manager this morning. And she said that the average length of time someone volunteers with our organization is about 2 to 3 years. So someone had asked, is there a need for volunteers? Yes, because we do have turnover, just like in anything else. And so people come on 2 to 3 years, some people 8 to 10 longer. Some people are here for much longer, but we always need to fill those spots so that we can serve patients better and meet the requirements from the government on our organization. So yes, we always need volunteers, and we're running classes throughout the year that you can sign up for to start. All right, so we're just going to pop through some of the questions that were submitted and panelists will do their best to answer. I want to start with, this because I want to make sure we get to it. Somebody asked the very important question: what is one of your most memorable or rewarding experiences as a volunteer? And I think when you hear them answer these questions, it will give you a lot of insight into their specialty and their heart for volunteering. So just because she's closest to me, we'll start with Suze, and then we'll work our way around the table, and then we'll go to Zoom and we'll catch you, Kathy, right?
So as I said, I offer Reiki, and pretty much my most memorable experience was I went into a room to offer Reiki to a patient that was transitioning, possibly actively dying, and the daughter of the patient said, turned to her husband, said, you should have some Reiki. And he was skeptical. And so he left the room, and he said, maybe later I'll find you. Well, then I went to check back, and he wasn't in the room, but the daughter said, I don't know where he is. I said, well, what about your mom? Would she like Reiki? She said, well, do you work on somebody that's this close to dying? And I said, yes, all the time. And so I did Reiki, the daughter was there, and I just had this sense that she was going to pass very soon or in the moment. And I finished. The daughter was tearful. I asked her if she would like Reiki. She said, no, I feel like that was delivered through you to me as well as my mom. It was so beautiful. And this patient had dementia, and the family had just been told that morning that she would probably hang on and death would be prolonged. And I no sooner left the room and the husband was coming to find me, frantic. He went to all the volunteers, I have to find her, I have to find her. Did she leave yet? And I thought something maybe bad had happened, but he wanted to come find me because the patient had died right after I left the room. And they felt it was a miracle that the Reiki relaxed her and calmed her enough that she could transition smoothly and easily without this prolonged death that they anticipated. And they were in tears. The daughter wrote me the most beautiful letter after. It's very emotional, but it was very touching. And he couldn't thank me enough. And was telling everybody in the facility how special and meaningful this was to them.
Yeah, I was there that day too. I remember that. It was wonderful. Now I'm emotional. I'll just, I have a lot of very similar experiences with cats. So just one that stands out to me is there was a woman, she was sitting up in the chair at Gosnell House, and it was known that she liked cats. So I brought, because I think she either had one that died recently or one that she wasn't going to see again. And so I went into the room with Ferris, and Ferris, he's a wonderful therapy cat, but he's not much of a lap cat. Well, she was sitting up, I brought him over, I put him on her lap, and he stayed there, first of all, which was a shocker, for like 10 minutes. And she held him and pet him, and she started to cry. She was so happy. And there was one of the aides was in the room at the same time. She started to cry. And it was really hard for me not to cry. But it was so fantastic that I brought such joy to this woman who was never going to see her cat again. And so when we left, it became this story around Gosnell House of how this patient just enjoyed how meaningful it was for her to hold a cat.
That's such a neat point that you're making, because some of our patients, when they're at a certain point in a disease progression, they're not able to keep a pet, or there's no one to care for that pet. And so for them to have that experience after feeling that loss for themselves personally is really moving. It's really touching and so important to them in their journey. So that's a great story. Thanks for sharing that. Lee, how about music? What part of
Music, well, like the speakers before, we had so many remarkable events that it's really hard to say, oh, this was the most remarkable. But I have one that's right up there.
Okay.
Again, at Gosnell, as part of the Heartstring program, a dear friend played the cello, and I played the ukulele. And again, it wasn't this one, it was the mellow one. And we were playing, it turned out that everyone over the several months that we started trying to get a set list liked hymns. Okay, we'll do hymns. So we were doing the Old Rugged Cross, and a woman probably in her mid-50s was leaning against the doorway and listening to us. So she was singing the song, the Old Rugged Cross. And, which was good. We don't sing, we just play, but she was singing along. When we finished, she said, would you mind coming in and playing that for my mom? Because she and I sang that together. Well, my heart started beating, and we all got chills, and I said, oh, I hope we do this right. And we walked down, and in a very nice way, the nurses stopped us and said, no, you can't go in because she's actively dying, but you can play in the hallway. So we set up cello and ukulele, and one daughter went in, and we started playing, and we could hear her singing, and we could hear her sobbing. Luckily, we knew by memory how to play that, otherwise we wouldn't have been able to see the notes either. And she came out and she said, my mother has been in here for 3 days, getting in bed, and she hasn't moved a muscle, including her face. And when I started singing, she smiled. And then soon thereafter, she passed away.
That's amazing. Music has such a beautiful way of adding comfort. And I hear so often of people whose family member is passing, and the family members come around the bedside and just stay for hours. And those are the songs that cause that smile.
Right.
They have a deep kind of muscle memory in each person. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And now we'll move to Kathy, if you want to share something that is a meaningful story from your experience as a volunteer.
Sure. One of my first experiences is still one of the most memorable to me. I was called into a house where there was a man in his 80s who was dying, and his wife, who was 25 years younger. And he thought that he wanted to do a biography for his family. And so I started interviewing him, and it became clear to me that there was a lot of dysfunction in his family, that his kids had been really upset by this second marriage. And it also became clear to me that he was declining faster than his ability to tell me his life story was possible. You know, it was taking too long. And I said to him, you know, is there any chance that you want to communicate with these family members more directly, aside from trying to write a big biography? And so we started talking. He started talking about his relationships with his different children and the different issues that he was having with them. And I interviewed him for each of 12 letters that he sent out. 3 of them were to his children. The rest were thank you and I love you to special friends and certain family members. But the letters to his children came out of his skin. He was talking about the ways that he'd wronged them and asking for their forgiveness. And what happened is unbelievably, all of his children came to visit him before he died. And he was so grateful. You know, he never imagined that that could happen, but it was his courage and his bravery in really delving into what had been painful parts of his life that enabled him to do this work with me. And I was so privileged and honored to be part of it.
Oh, thank you. That really is powerful work that you're doing. While I have you, we had a couple of questions. One was about the idea of sitting vigil and how do you do that? Or how do you sit and just offer a quiet presence? And is that something that you find people request?
Yes, definitely. Sitting vigil is always a privilege. And usually what I do, and whether you have Reiki or not, you do. And I would usually hold someone's hand and just the Reiki will come out whether I wanted to or not. And it feels like there's comfort in that. So I'd say physical touch is really important in vigil work.
And one of our registrants was asking about what is the process if someone is interested in becoming a death doula?
If someone what? I'm sorry,
Is
Ken.
interested in becoming a death doula? A doula?
I'm sorry, I'm still not getting it. That they're at death's door?
No, someone wants to better understand the process to become a death doula.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I apologize.
No worries, that's okay.
There are a couple wonderful programs, and I did a lot of research into them originally and came out with the University of Vermont's program, which was really I think the first of its kind. And it's about a year long. I did it online.
Okay, good.
And I really recommend it.
And we'll put that in the resource list, and someone mentioned
UNE has a program as well
has a
now.
program now as well, so two really reasonably, close to us, so to speak, programs,
Mm.
or either online or in person. Okay, great. Moving along, let's see. What different types of pet therapy are offered through the volunteer program?
We have one cat and I think about 7 dogs. We have a newly added dog to our fleet. And mostly from what I understand, we all visit Gosnell House. But I believe some of them, I can't speak to the dogs, but I believe they do home program work sometimes. But yeah, Ferris is the only cat, as I was telling Lee earlier, as he said, I've never heard of a therapy cat. I hear that every week, multiple times. I walk in, I say, I have a therapy cat, and they say, really? I've never heard of therapy cat. And there are only 200 of us in the country, so it makes sense that people would not have heard of it. But so we have dogs and now a cat that come into the program. I'm sure if somebody wanted to bring in a rabbit or a guinea pig or some other like small domesticated calm animal that can pass the tests, they would be welcome to us.
And you should hold up the
Oh
card.
yeah, and
I
then
mean, you may not be able to see this very well.
he has a
but
business card.
He has a business card. And we'll try to snap a picture of it.
Okay.
So people
Okay.
can see it closer.
Yeah, and this I basically give out to patients that have really made a connection with the cat. Just or even the family member, anybody in the room that really, or sometimes family members find it such a mood. And I've had people video call or phone call relatives to show them the cat while the cat's in the room. So because there are a lot of cat people out there.
Yes, there are.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. We had another question, Suze, about Reiki and how does it help a patient at end of life? And I know you've already touched on this a little between you and Kathy, but maybe just talk about what is the intended outcome.
So Reiki stands for Universal Life Force Energy. So we're made up of energy, everything's made up of energy. And when we go and offer Reiki for someone who is in the dying process, it can provide just a peaceful calming. It can be used for stress management. Sometimes people who have pain will actually benefit from Reiki, that it eases their pain. And it just kind of provides like a general well-being and balances the energies in the body. And so sometimes I will go into a room and a patient may be agitated or, moving around a lot in the bed, and we'll do Reiki and I leave and they're very calm and the family's like, wow, they haven't been like this whole time we've been here. Or we'll go in and it just feels like the family feels a shift in the room. It's very hard to explain sometimes, but they just seem to be more calm, more peaceful and at ease.
And I think that's a really nice point that you're making about settling and agitation, a response to agitation, because agitation is something a lot of patients experience at end of life.
Yeah.
And to know that there are alternatives for calming that.
Yes.
I think that's lovely to know. One of the questions we also received was about, what are the difficulties of volunteering with dementia patients? And I think when we talked about this before, you all sort of had a little bit to offer on your experience and how it is still very meaningful. And maybe you can just sort of share generically some of from your experience, what you observed.
Well, my experience playing for and with dementia patients, and by with, I mean, it's to get them to, if they can, to sing along, to tap their feet, to hum. And I think the big lesson for me is always, it's not about you. Don't take it personally. They can get very angry, they can get agitated, and it's not you. And you just meet them where they are, and you just know that I'm not going to do that one, and you sit back and wait for them to reach out to you. And it's really not as hard or as scary as people think to be with someone living with dementia. You just simply have to be open and be there, basically be there.
I think we've talked about flexibility. You have to be really flexible when working with somebody with dementia. I went into a room to offer Reiki to a patient who'd been getting Reiki every day. And she wanted it this particular day as well. And halfway through the session, she opened her eyes and asked me what the heck I was doing there. And I said, oh, we were doing Reiki. And she quickly kicked me out of the room. And I did not take that personally. And, I just felt today was not the day. But when I was out in the hallway after I left the room, the family was out there. And I ended up providing Reiki to 5 family members for that patient. And they had just such a powerful experience with that. And so I felt, even though the mom didn't want it that day, that I was able to offer them some peace and calm. That was nice.
Yeah. My only experience is oftentimes for some reason the cat doesn't go into rooms with dementia patients. Either they're alone or their families say like, oh, they don't want a visitor. So that's fine. But I did visit one woman recently, and the only sign to me that she had dementia, she asked his name twice within a 5-minute visit. I just answered it again. And I have worked in other places with therapists. I once had him sit on someone's lap for 10 minutes, and the woman told me the same story 4 times about her cat. And I just listened like it was a new story every time. And she's a hoot. I loved her. So I didn't mind hearing the story 4 times. But yeah, again, meet them where they're at and just answer the questions. It's
More than once if needed.
Yes,
That's right.
4 times, yes.
And I don't know if Kathy has anything to add.
Just
And jump in anytime.
sometimes dementia patients like to wander down memory lane, even though their memory is faulty. So with a dementia patient, rather than try and come up with any kind of cohesive life story, or I will just encourage them to talk about their lives. And often they really enjoy that. But just a note on music, one of my favorite patients in the years I've been with hospice was in her 90s and demented. And for the life of me, I couldn't get anything out of this woman. I kept showing up at this facility. And finally, I tried singing. And to our music person, I really saw how music plays a huge role with dementia. And from then on, I would spend 40 minutes singing old musical comedy tunes with this woman. So I think dementia patients vary a lot, and you have to feel underneath for what they need. Do they need to tell a story? Do they need to be reminded through music? Sometimes Reiki can be very calming if a dementia patient is agitated. So there are a lot of different approaches to take.
When I was training for my job here, I sat with a social worker and shadowed her for a little bit. And one of the patients we saw didn't speak, wasn't moving around much, pretty much just sitting in his room. And her specific visit, when she met him in whatever regular time frame she'd go, was to play music on her phone. She wasn't a musician, but she knew music that the family had said he liked. So she would just sit there with him and play music. And this gentleman who didn't move, didn't respond, didn't react, would start tapping his toes, patting his knee, a little smile, his head would nod. It can reach deep with dementia and Alzheimer's patients. And it can be a beautiful thing. Yeah, so that's good. That's a great tool to have. Kim, is there a question that we want to answer that came in on the chat?
There is a question. This, someone says, I just heard someone say that she tried to stay unemotional at the time close to someone's passing. If I am someone who does get emotional, I'm assuming that this is not the volunteer opportunity for me, question mark. And I thought that was an interesting question. And how do you all feel about that? Because you can see the emotion when you told your story. So I know you're not unemotional people, but how does that intersect?
Well, one good thing that you learned during the training is there is a huge emphasis on self-care. Like we are reminded to to practice self-care, however that looks to each of us. And once I had a patient, a home patient, and when she died, I took 8 months off. It was real, and it wasn't an emotional thing. It just kind of rocked my world a little bit. She's younger than I and that kind of stuff. But and then when I came back, I changed gears and I started with my cat. That's one thing. And yeah, a lot of people say I couldn't do this. I get too attached. It's not wrong to get attached. You just have to take care of yourself in that. You don't have to be cold-hearted to be a volunteer. But if it's going to cause you a repeated pain, then yeah, you might want to consider that. So finding that balance is, I think, with practice, you get there.
I mean, I'm a self-proclaimed crybaby. I'm very emotional.
it.
And I think, there's times when I have cried with families, like that story I told. We were all in the room crying. It was very emotional, but that felt okay. And it felt like they knew I really cared and there was a connection there. And then there's other times where, we leave our shifts. I'm sure it's all happened and we're quite emotional. We went and not really express that while we were with the family and the patient. And that's when, you do practice good self-care and take care of you. But I do think that you can be emotional and be a crybaby like me and still do this.
I think so too. And I think there's a slight distinction to make between Amy's reference to it taking a toll on you, right? Emotionally feeling that kind of in a harmful way to your best.
Yeah.
And to being allowed or able to show emotion, because I think we are all told that we are allowed to show that, and we wouldn't be human if it didn't pop up once in a while, or maybe this wouldn't be the right job for us if it did, right? It just depends on the situation, the frequency.
Yeah.
I get teary-eyed a lot. I get teary-eyed a lot and goes now, and that's okay. That's okay. And I was doing home care for 1.5 years, which was unusual. In hospice care for 1.5 years, and he passed away. And I said, I'm not going to do that again. And so I found something else to do. I knew to take care of myself, home care, getting attached. No, not for me. But there's plenty of opportunities. You don't have to just play the ukulele. There's plenty of things.
Yeah, that actually, you just brought up a good point that I don't think we mentioned. If being emotional is too instinctive for you, or it's too difficult for you, we have so many volunteers who do other things that aren't at the patient's bedside. And so it's important to remember there are other things you can do. We often look for volunteers to help us at some events that we're at. And we have volunteers that do office work for us and help us with mailing campaigns. So there are other ways to volunteer, but I don't want anyone to feel discouraged. If you're emotional, that doesn't rule you out. Just pay very good attention to your self-care and what's best for you. Anything to add, Kathy, that we might have missed?
I don't think so.
One question that I want to touch on, I know we're a little after 12, but I think one more question I'll put out there. We talked briefly when we were preparing for this about grief, and there was a question about grief. And we're not volunteering as bereavement staff or in that regard, but we were talking about how we respond or how we think our work helps people who are grieving. And I just wanted to get your opinions on that a little bit from your experience. I know we talk a lot about anticipatory grief for the people, even the patients who are grieving their own diagnosis and their caregivers and loved ones who are grieving alongside them. And what do you find your roles do to just kind of come around in that grief process?
For me, it's kind of easy. I walk into a room with a cat, it instantly breaks the ice, and we end up just changing this topic from death and dying to cats. In one case in particular, which was not that, it was just one woman in a room with her loved one. And I knocked on the door. I carry the cat in a backpack. So I just kind of walk in and I say, I have the cat. And I have to turn around because they don't believe me until I show them the cat. And I was hesitant because she was crying. And she was sitting next to her loved one with a photo album crying. And I said, oh, maybe this isn't a good time, but I just wanted to let you know that I have a therapy cat with me. And she said, for me? I said, yeah, for you. And she said, I love it. She closed the book and set it aside, and I put Ferris on her lap, and her tears dried up, and she smiled, and she petted him and stuff. And I just feel like, and by the time I left, she was smiling. And it's like she's not denying, we're not denying that she's in grief, but it sort of broke that cycle for just a few moments. And that was really nice. And I see that in a lot of rooms I go into, not as severe as somebody actively crying, but just maybe a somber mood and then the lift.
I like that. I like that you said break the cycle, because even if just for a little bit, like you're saying, it can bring some joy.
Yeah.
And a break in the grief just for a moment.
It's not denying that it's there. It's just a little break, a little shift, and then breather, and then, so, and I'm sure you experience this. You know, have comments?
It's the same with music, and I also, in addition to gospel, do go into homes at their request. And I bring words to each song, and I hand one sheet to the caregiver and one to the patient. After asking what kind of songs they like, and hopefully I've got the words, and it gives the caregiver a break because they are thinking about their loved one and what's going to happen. But for a moment, 5 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, they're enjoying themselves, and they're enjoying themselves being with the patient who's also enjoying. So sometimes just that anticipatory grief, give them a break. However, whether it's listen to them talk, play the music, patting a cat.
Yeah. Anyone else have anything to add? No? Okay. Let's, unless there are any other questions, we'll finish with this. What is, and you don't have to answer this, but if you have something to say, that would be great. What is your best advice to people considering this job, so to speak? I know it's probably not the income that you receive from it, right? So, but for people kind of trying to decide, is this right for me or not? Either what should they consider, or some advice from your experience on what it's meant to you. We'll start here, we'll go around, and we'll finish with that.
I think considering, the time commitment, if you can make that, I do feel that overall, they're very flexible with volunteers, and they don't ask us to do anything that we're uncomfortable to do. So there's definitely flexibility there. I think having an understanding where you are with, just with kind of death and dying and grief, and maybe I think there might be, you're not allowed to necessarily become a volunteer if you've had a recent close death. But, letting some time go between that and having your own time to process a recent loss would be a couple of things to consider.
Yeah, I'm just saying, just as far as my doing it, it just was a really nice way to feel like I'm making a difference, that I'm giving back, that I'm doing meaningful work. It can be very fulfilling. It's not easy work, but it's incredibly fulfilling, and sort of, it's challenging, but it's good. I don't know. It's really.
I would
good.
agree with that.
Yeah.
It's hard to describe.
It is hard to describe, but consider just how much you'd be helping, and how, that's it. I can't say more than that. Yeah.
I would say if you're wondering what should be a volunteer, first of all, you're thinking about it. take the leap, risk. You've got nothing to lose. And I think you can see from us that you will find experiences that you will not be able to match anywhere else in your life. And you will have memories that will live forever. It's worth it.
Kathy, any closing comments?
I would just say, keep talking to other volunteers if you have questions, that's helpful, and give it a go. I ditto to what everyone was saying about the fulfillment that can happen from reaching out into what's obviously a really hurting world right now. And this being a way to do that really changes people's lives, and deaths, changes their deaths.
Very well said. Thank you. And on that note, we'll close today's webinar. You can look for this to be posted within about a week. And in order to get to the library on YouTube for Ask the Experts, it's easiest to go to the website for Hospice of Southern Maine. And once you get there, you can find the section for Ask the Experts with a link to our library, and which will connect you through all of the videos we've done, which are stored on YouTube so that they're easy to watch. We also put links to additional resources, and whatever we've collected today, we'll put on the website as well. And you're certainly welcome to submit any questions through that website as well. So thank you for joining us today. Have a lovely day, and a big thank you to our volunteers. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing how meaningful your work